Okay.
Welcome, welcome to the Recovery Bros podcast. I'm Adam Sudd, and my co-host is Doug Bopst, and we are two guys in recovery having conversations for young men in recovery, real world conversations, world strategies, and real world tools that you can use. All right, Doug, what's up, man?
What's up, bro? I'm excited to chat about the five biggest mistakes that we think people make in recovery today.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it's like you gotta try to narrow it down to the biggest mistake. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of things that people do that could be done better, but like what I would consider like a mistake in recovery. That's a big word. And so I don't know, man. Where do you want to start?
I think we should go with the not so obvious ones because obviously people are like, "Oh, well, just don't use drugs," right? So that's the mistake you want to avoid. I think the biggest mistake is one of the biggest mistakes is future tripping. This idea that you look at what you don't have in your life, you like, all right, my gosh, how am I going to stay clean for 30 years? Like, I haven't even been able to stay clean for a week. How am I going to be able to like get a good job? I've done all this stuff. Like, you worry so much about the future. And I think it's important, but I think you have to draw this line between like the future and what you're looking towards while also staying in the present moment so that you can just stay there, like just stay in that moment. Because if you don't, you'll say things like, I'm never going to be able to achieve this. I mean, that person is so much better than me. I mean, there's a bazillion things that can go wrong if you don't like figure out how to like overcome that mistake.
It's actually a really great place to start. And I think number two that we'll talk about after we're done discussing this one is very similar. Um, is that everyone wants to believe that they should be able to paint the trajectory of their recovery. It's like this is where I have to go, and if I don't go there, then I'm not in recovery. And what they're going to do is they're going to do what you're saying. They're going to future trip. They're going to go, well, there's no way that's going to happen for me. There's no way. Look at me. Look at where I am. Look at what I've done. Look what I've wasted. Right? Like all that. How could I ever get there? Or it's too far. That's way too far a journey for me. I'm not. I don't believe I could get there. So why would I? And I think that there's so much about going into recovery that people want to believe that they're going to get somewhere that it makes this whole thing worth it. And so that future tripping, I think, is part of that psychological strategy of like, this is why I'm into this thing. I'm doing this thing is because of that future that I'm painting. And what they're trying to do is figure out, is it even feasible or reasonable for them to consider that they could even have that kind of thing? Because it's like, well, then why would I take on this effort otherwise? And you're so right about that. It takes you out of what you're supposed to be focused on in the present moment, which is what could you aim at today that if you did really well would be a way for you to move forward in your recovery. What is so necessary in the moment? Is it getting up and doing going to your first meeting of the day, or getting up and going to the gym, or getting up and making a healthy meal, or getting up and calling your sober companion? Whatever it is that you need to do that is necessary now, period, end of story. This must take place first, or recovery doesn't start. Right? It's hard to do. It's a hard thing to do, is to be so grounded in the moment, because Doug, as you know, people in recovery are not very happy with the present moment. That's why we used drugs in the first place.
Yeah.
And so like saying, no, you should focus on where you are. It's like, no, I don't like doing that. I haven't liked doing that for 10 years, you know?
Yeah. And then you just miss some of the stuff that's right in front of you that you can celebrate. And I think that if you're like looking so far ahead, you end up just setting these huge goals because you want to then get there faster because in your mind is like, all right, like I can't, you know, staying clean for this long or losing this amount of weight or whatever just seems so impossible. So how can I take shortcuts?
Dude,
How can I short this? And how can I take a different route that will alleviate some of this pain and the impatience or whatever that person's going through? And then I just think that, you just lose out on your ability, like I said, to stay present. And then you just end up, more than anything, what happens is you end up quitting because you're like, this seems so hard and this seems so challenging.
let me ask you a question about this. Do you think that it's true statement that people are not aware, or they're not able to be aware of the progress that they're making until they're months past the progress has happened?
Yeah, because you're just saying like in the weight loss world where it's like it takes X amount of time for your neighbor or somebody you really don't know to see the progress that you've made. It takes X amount of time for someone close to you to see. And then it's like it takes even longer for you to see it, right? And I think it's because you're so used to like looking at yourself every day, and that the progress is much smaller in your eyes because you're seeing yourself so often that the changes feel that much smaller. And we're all so hard on ourselves, right? And so we're not going to be able to see the benefits as quickly because we're always going to have that lens of negativity and like, oh, I should be doing better. I should be leaner. I should be bigger. I should be healthier. I should be whatever. And then that like kind of warps perspective and perception of where we're at in that journey.
Well, I think you're absolutely right because it's like if you were to think about being 6 months sober, right? For the majority of people, if you first of all, if you get to 6 months, congratulations. Those first 6 months are no joke. But you get there and your life isn't all that different, you know? Like it's just not. Like it hasn't changed for you, right? You're just not using anymore. But your life hasn't been really repaired maybe in the way that you wanted to be repaired. It hasn't really offered you the opportunities that you're hoping for, right? You're just 6 months in, so it still feels shaky. And so it's like, my gosh, that was 6 months of hard work. What's the next year going to feel like? And am I even interested in doing this if I don't believe that in the next year that noticeable difference in my life is going to be there? So I think that that's a huge kind of fallacy that the person in early recovery falls into, which is like, I don't see where this becomes worth it because this was 6 months of effort and it ain't all that different yet.
Right. And I think that also what happens, and I think we've talked about this, is early recovery is hard. It's so challenging. And I think that because of that, um, you have stuff come up, you have family things come up, you have potentially legal stuff that you've been facing come up, you have all these things that are impacting the way you feel about yourself. And so it just seems a lot more challenging at the beginning, and therefore it can just be demotivating. It's like, man, my life is just so hard right now. I thought I was making this decision, and I thought things were going to get better, and this is really hard. How do I sustain this? But the truth is, and everyone I think says this, is that it is hard in the beginning, but eventually over time, it does get easier. Like you're somebody who's 10 years sober isn't like, God, life is just so hard every single day. Like I can't like stop craving like drugs. I mean, maybe it exists. I haven't come across it yet, and I've come across a lot of people. But eventually, it does become a lot easier. At first, it can be very tough.
So my what I would ask is, then, Doug, what do you think is a great solution to people in recovery who are struggling with that future tripping, behavior? What worked for you when you were doing that?
I mean, a day at a time, right? And I didn't go to 12-step meetings to learn that. I just knew that. I knew already that in the past I had thought so much about the future and how much of a failure I was going to be that didn't wasn't going to work for me anymore. And I also had the benefit of having a really good cellmate who was like, I remember asking him, I said, how long is this going to take for me to really transform my life? And he said, it's going to take a long time. You've been beating yourself up for quite some time. So I already had that preconceived idea in my head. And then I just saw that what happened in jail, that the transformation had happened from just focusing on like day by day. And that was like the mentality that I had coming out of it. And I think that's the solution: is focus on the day to day. Understand that there's a lot you have control over. You have control over your health, your habits, your behavior, who you spend time with, sleep, stress levels to a certain point, and what you eat, that sort of thing. And if you do those things in the right way, each day, you give yourself a pretty good shot at making it through.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the kind of the mindset shift that happened for me that allowed me to get past that one and the one I'm going to talk about next for I think is number two is the idea that, well, if something is ruined, then it's ruined. And so what? You're going to not go get what could be yours? You're not going to go get the benefit and the opportunities that are still available to you in your life just because this thing that you're defining that can't be undone exists? It's like, why would you not go for everything you could just because there's a thing that you define as certain? If it's certain, then don't worry about it. If it's not for you, then and it's certain, then don't worry about it. Go get what could be yours. Like if you're going to do this thing and you're going to say, well, my life is this way and therefore it's like, well, so then what? You're just going to become a bitter, angry person? Then your life is worse. Why don't you just, focus on becoming the most capable version of yourself that you possibly could by doing everything that you possibly could today and see what happens. Like I remember that mindset shift kind of got I was very lucky. The people who kind of ran our sober living house were kind of a lot of ex-military people, and so they had a lot of like, dude, what are you gonna like? Are you gonna cry about it then? Like what? Like if you really believe that you've done something that can't be undone, why are you wasting your time worrying about it? Go get what else is available to you. And I was just like, ah, gosh, man, I really need to hear that. you know,
So what do you think's the second biggest mistake people
I
make?
honestly think it's something called the sunken cost fallacy. The belief that, well, you've done too much, you've wasted too much of your life. There's too much now in the past that is no longer available to you. And so, now that you're noticing the difficulty of recovery, it's not even worth it. It's like what I'm at, like say for example, you got somebody who's, 30 years old. And God, I was my age when I checked into rehab and I thought I was old, right? I thought by 30, if I couldn't get this thing together, too much time had passed. I didn't have enough of my life in front of me to focus on. There wasn't enough. And that is such a misconception. Like the sunken cost fallacy, you've wasted too much of your money, right? You've lost too many years of your life. You've lost too many friends you can't get back. You've blown too many opportunities you can't get again. That sunken cost fallacy is such a barrier because it will trick you into believing that there isn't any opportunity in front of you, even though there's a world of it in front of you.
I agree. And actually, you see that a lot. You look at people who are just so hung up on their past and they think that, and their past becomes their prison. And they're like, oh my gosh, like I've made too many mistakes. I failed too many times. I'm a loser. And I think it's just this simple shift in saying, I failed or I lost, but I'm not a failure. I'm not a loser. Right. Because I think those are two different things. One is very situation dependent. The other one is you're defining yourself as a person by a character trait, which I think is a big mistake. And I think that what happens is you'll have people who have achieved so much in their life,
Mm-hmm.
and then it gets thrown all away
Yep.
because of addiction. And then you're like, oh, I can't get that back. I've ruined so much of what I've built. So like, what do I do? And it's a tough battle, right? That said, it's like kind of like what you um referred to with the people in your sober living. It's like, well, what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
those opportunities are gone. And you have nothing else to do with that at the moment. The only thing you can do is go after other things.
Yeah, it's like, and I think that this messaging really resonates with men is like, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to define the rest of your life by the things you didn't do well in your past? Or are you going to notice that you have a future in front of you? You could develop competency and agency. You could be so much more than you are right now. And yet you want to sit there and define yourself by the losses of your past? Like, dude, no. Like, absolutely not. Unacceptable. You could be so much more than you are right now. And all you have to do is decide to do the things necessary today and just keep taking one step forward. It's like that relentless forward progress, mentality of like ultra running is like, I don't care if you run, walk, crawl, it doesn't make a difference. You just finish the race by taking another step. It's like, just do the necessary thing.
Yeah, and it's like, and that's why I think what my cellmate said to me when I was in jail resonated with me so much. He was like, "Quit being a wuss," right? Like, what are you gonna
I
do
mean,
about it?
like, not to be, I mean, I'm sorry, but like at a certain point, it's like I remember being in sober living with these guys, and they would be like complaining about this and this and this. And at a certain point, I'm like, dude, shut up. Like, sorry, but like everyone here has a story, but we're
Yeah,
not we're not here to live in that story anymore. We're here to do the work we didn't know how to do before we got here. So let's put that shit aside and let's go do this thing together.
I know. It's like you have to adopt this no complaining rule
Yeah.
because you just waste time. Like complaining about the problem does absolutely nothing. And I think that when you just look at all the stuff that you've lost in your life and you look at the past, I mean, you're going to be a very miserable person. And so if the goal, if the reason, most of the time, the reason that people are so upset about the loss is because they were so happy, they were successful, they had purpose, they had meaning. And the only way to get that back is to not focus on what you've lost. Because if you focus on what you've lost, you're going to be miserable. You're going to be irritable. You're going to be like irritate, like all the things consistently, and you're going to be a mopey person that no one wants to be around. And so you have to just have that switch. That's like, okay, I realize that I don't have these things anymore. Like, what can I go and get after it with in the future? And I think that's what one of the leads into the third biggest mistake I think people make is that they don't like create something for themselves outside of recovery. And we've talked about this to where I think recovery is obviously very important for people, and I think it should be a main focus of people's lives. That being said, I think it's also important to have identity outside of that
Yes.
and to create something. And that could be just redefining who you are in your career. It could be like working on yourself and being better in relationships. It could be, um, just being somebody that mentors other people or coaches other people. It could be whatever. What I'm saying is that you have to find a way to get outside of recovery and do something else so that you're not just in that rat race and you're around people where all they're doing, their main focus is to stay sober. And while that's a great goal, I think to be fulfilled and happy in recovery, I think you have to have other things outside of that.
Well, you're absolutely right. From in my experience, this resonates really well. Is there has to be a reason why getting sober matters. Like, what are you going to get up and orient your life around, right? What thing could you develop? What skill or talent or craft or whatever could you become competent in that you could share with the world, and the world would find it valuable, that doesn't define you in separately as someone who's in recovery. Like, it's like, well, great, you got sober, fantastic, and obviously that's worthy of applause. But then, why in the world did you want to do it in the first place? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what meaningful future was threatened by not being sober in the first place, that you decided to set foot in treatment on day one and get to work? Like, it couldn't be that I want to spend the rest of my life going to meetings every day. That couldn't have been your meaningful future. I would think that there's more to you than that. And so, whatever that is, get to work on it. Let that be the biggest part of your identity that recovery made possible, right? It's like, this is the thing that gave you a platform to start building the meaningful part of your life.
Well, we've talked about this before. It's like you got to become a person that doesn't need to use drugs anymore, right?
Yes.
And the way you do that is to build something outside of that so that there's more for you to fall back on, so that there's more for you to think about when you're making decisions, or because you end up just building, the self-confidence and self-esteem to a level where like none of that stuff makes sense anymore, because now you're like somebody like you're just a person who doesn't do those things anymore. Now you're health conscious, now you're career oriented, now you're like worried about being a better husband or a better father. Now you're focused more on like helping others, to where those decisions don't make sense like they used to, because now you're becoming somebody that has a high level of self-worth and self-esteem.
Yeah, it's the I don't want to spend my life not using. I want to create a life where use is no longer necessary, right? Like, so that's uh, everyone needs to spend at least, I think, the first 6 months, easily first year of their life. They're going to spend the first year of the recovery. They're spending those that you're not using. It's actively getting up and figuring out how to not use. But eventually that has to switch. It has to flip to this thing where I figured out how to not use. Now I need to actively replace it with something that gives me a life I'm excited and interested to show up and be present for. And being present for it means I'm not interested in using, right? Because it's the thing that I decided that all of this was about, right? That all of this effort, all of this difficulty and struggle, and believe me, Doug and I know recovery is hard. That first year of recovery is no joke. It is tough. And so if you're going to do this thing, if you're going to take on this extraordinary effort, why in the world would you? Like, get that thing, that meaningful future that you're interested in. And you don't need to, it doesn't need to be this grand purpose, right?
Mhm.
But it can be this, I want to know, what it would be like to be able to take care of myself, have a financially independent life where I don't use. I want to know what it's like to be a reliable, responsible, trustworthy person for my family. And I want to figure out how I can do that now that I'm not going to be using anymore. Right? That's a meaningful future. That's an aim that would make sense for you. And then if you discover a purpose within that, great. But it has to be something about a valuable identity, a valuable version of yourself to you and to others.
So true. I mean, that it's so true. I couldn't have said it better. Like, you have to find something outside of yourself. And sometimes, like you said, like in the recovery community, that leads to purpose. And you start to sponsor people, you start to coach people. Maybe you start a podcast. Maybe you end up writing a book. Maybe you end up like starting your own community. Whatever it is that can lead to purpose, but there has to be like an upward trajectory, because I think that the best way to erase how you feel about your past is to work towards becoming that better version of yourself. And it's going to ebb and flow because, like we said at the beginning, you don't want to say, how do I get from point A to point Z? It's more like, how do I get from point A to point B and B to C and C to D? And then you eventually you land somewhere near Z. And so but that you only get there by identifying the fact that you want to become something, outside of just being quote unquote sober or clean or in recovery. You want to then work on other areas of your life that will also like impact you becoming a better person. So what do you think is that, like, if we were to come up with another one, like number 4, what would you say it is?
Let's say there's a great quote in behavior change or lifestyle change, or certainly in fitness, which is, "Don't judge your chapter one by everyone else's chapter 12." Right. So what I mean by that is, if this is month one of you, do not like compare yourself to those people who've been in recovery for 3 years. Right. Don't set them as a standard for you to recover. Set them simply as a visible possibility. Right. They're living examples of what's possible. Right. But don't get in a hurry to get where they are, and then you're going to wake up a month later and you're still at month two and it doesn't feel fast enough. Right. So this idea that your recovery journey has to track along the person who's coaching you, or who you've listened to. Everyone's recovery journey is their own. For some people, it takes, 6 months to get it. For some people, it takes 2 years to get it. And the thing is, I guarantee you, if you were to ask any of those people who have gotten to the other side of this thing and they're fully, embodied in their new sober identity, neither of them would say they wish it happened faster. They'd be like, no, I'm so glad I was able to figure it out the way I figured it out.
So true. I think that I think that this falls into the comparison trap, right? And one of the analogies I like to use is, if there was a race and you were running a race and there's like 5 lanes, and you tried to go next to you in the person next to you's lane and finish that person's race, you would be disqualified.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a great metaphor for what we're talking about, because that's just the way it is. It's like, if you try to live someone else's life, you're going to fall on your face. If you try to live someone else's life, you're going to end up miserable. You're going to end up becoming somebody you don't like, because that life just wasn't meant for you. And it sounds cliche, but eventually there will be a point that you're like, man, like, why did I do this thing? I only did this so that people would like me, or I did this because I wanted to be like that person, or I did this because I was uncomfortable with my situation and I wanted to alleviate the comfort at the beginning, and now I'm in a place that I don't want to be in. Like, these moments happen, trust me. And I think that what you have to understand is everyone's got a story. And in the social media world that we live in, we only, a lot of times we see just the top of people's lives. We either see the bottom or we see the top, right? And um, we don't see a lot of like in the middle. You see a lot of before and after photos, right? You see a lot of people when they've had success. And so I share that because everybody that I've talked to that appears to be successful on the outside, there was a struggle to get there in some level, you know, and maybe it wasn't drug related, but there was some hardship that got in the way that they had to adjust and find a way to course correct. And so what I share this because like you know just because you feel like you're at chapter one, like everyone who was successful at something had to start there. The person who has 30 years of recovery had to start with one day. The person who has $1 million in the bank had to start with $100. And again, all this sounds so trite, but there's like you have no other choice but to look at it this way. I'm telling you, if you try to play the comparison game and you play it wrong, you're going to lose every single time. And I think the only way the comparison game works is when you get to a place where you feel good enough about yourself to look at someone's success objectively and with the mindset of the old saying, it's like success leaves clues. Like, what did that person do that I can have takeaways from that maybe can help me? I mean, not take a shortcut to success, but help me like improve my life in the moment.
Yeah. There's
That's the only time the comparison game works.
there's that great quote. Bruce Lee said that take what's useful, discard what's useless, and add what's uniquely your own. It's
Yeah.
like, but to your point is there's a quote that says, "No one walked uphill on accident." And so when you think about success, it's like everyone who got to this higher point in their life, they had to do that on purpose. They had to intentionally take the road of more resistance, right? They didn't go downhill. A lot of people go downhill on accident. No one goes uphill on accident. And so from this perspective, I would say look at everyone as an example of what's possible. Oh, what they're doing seems interesting. That seems like a good thing to do for recovery. Let me see if that works for me or not. And if it doesn't work for you, it's not because you're not good at recovery. It's because that system doesn't work well for you at this time. So just let it go and find someone else, find something else, find anyone that will give you suggestions for how to do this well. Be the most open-minded you've ever been. Be okay with being wrong. It's like the rightest person in recovery usually ends up relapsing. The the person who's the most open to going, oh, I should do it differently. Let's go this direction, not that direction. Those are ones who are far more likely to do well because they're interested in understanding how to be better at the action of being in recovery, not at being a recovered person. And so I think that that's a pretty interesting, which I think would lead me into the last one. And I think this is useful is understand how to applaud your own efforts appropriately.
Mhm.
Everyone wants you, like you said, everyone wants you to get to that 6 month chip or that 1 year chip. And it's like there's a quote that says, uh, there's during a marathon, there are only two times when people will clap for you, at the beginning and the end, and neither of those points are when you needed it. And so if you think about recovery in the same way, everyone's going to applaud you for checking into rehab. They're going to go, way to go, good for you. And when you get your 1 year chip, they're going to be in the room. They're going to applaud you. It's like, great, thank you. But I needed you on every other day in between this. You have to be your own, kind of cheering squad. You have to learn how to applaud your efforts. It's in applauding your own efforts, the things that got you to that moment. That's what's going to raise your self esteem. That's what's going to esteem the behaviors of recovery that are going to matter the most to you. Because at the end of the day, when you get to 1 year, someone's going to applaud you, and a year from now, you're going to forget who was in the room. You're just not going to remember who was there. It won't matter to you. But if you, on every single difficult day that happens, you sit down at the end of the day and go, I saw what I did there. Today was tough. And I still did the thing I needed to do. That's worthy of applause. Way to go. Fantastic job. If you're the person who can do that for yourself, that is how you're going to do well. It is not waiting for 1 year.
Couldn't have said it better myself, man. Like celebrate those small wins, stack them, and then you start to become this like smaller evolution of yourself on a regular basis, and then you become unrecognizable. You get to a certain point where you look at those photos and you're like, oh man, I don't even recognize that person, and it comes from those wins and like being like, man, like these are all the things that I did on a regular basis. It's like, oh, I went 3 days without using. Oh, I went like 6 days without missing a day at the gym. Oh, I went like 2 weeks without hanging out with that person I shouldn't be hanging out with. And those all add up and they start to like build your self esteem. And there's like an old saying that's like the best way to build your self confidence is to keep your word to yourself.
Yes.
And that's part of the small wins, and that's part of the finding ways to celebrate yourself accurately. Is, did you keep your word today? Did you say you were going to do that thing, and did you actually follow through? Did you say you were going to go to the gym, and did you do it? Yes, great. You're probably going to feel better about yourself. Did you say you weren't going to go to that place anymore, and you didn't? Yes, and then now you're going to feel better about yourself, right? um and so I think this is a great way for us to kind of end, because I think that if people can avoid these five mistakes, I mean, I'm not saying that recovery will then be bulletproof, but it's going to be a heck of a lot easier than if you try to fall into these traps.
You remind me of this quote that I heard Jimmy Carr say. He said, "Real self confidence doesn't come from affirmations; it comes from giving the world undeniable proof that you are who you say you are." And I think that's exactly what you were talking about. Is keep your own, be honest. You know, do what you say you're going to do. Be a man of your word. If you say today was supposed to be about recovery, then let it be about recovery. There's a million reasons why not to do it, but the only one that matters the most is what you said you were going to do for yourself. So you know what? Let it be tough, and you know what? Be glad it is. Be glad it's tough. It'll be the realest thing you ever do in your life. It's like Jordan Peterson says, adventure exists only on the other side of choosing the path of maximal responsibility. The heaviest load you could possibly carry, the furthest distance you could possibly go. That's where the greatest adventure in life takes place. And it's like, Doug, if you and I were to think about what parts of our life were the grandest adventures of all, it would be recovery. Like nothing has been more real in my life than those 11 months.
Adam, great combo. I highly encourage people to implement this into their lives if they're in early recovery, or if they're in recovery and you're struggling, or if you want to share this with somebody that is going through it. So, bro, this is a great combo. Highly encourage people to leave comments with feedback, propose new topics, maybe guests they want to have on, and we appreciate everybody's support.